you think you ought to? Well, here is a worry. Okay, okay. Thanks for being honest. Cats and dogs worry too. You know, this time of year they worry that we forgot to feed them when the clock turns back for daylight saving time. And it's getting dark and their food bowl is filling and worrying the most. We worry about everything, right? Gas prices, jobs, the economy, state of the world, relationships and marriages, the ones we're in, the ones we're longing for. Parents worry about children, siblings worry about things in relatives, you name it, someone worrying about it. It's hard to escape worry. A lady once said, you know, I just don't worry about anything. But I've got a daughter who worries about everything. And I'm really worried about her. Jesus is aware of worry and anxiety, but it's the heart of one of the most important teachings of his in the gospel, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus tells us we ought not to worry about the things that worry us, that we ought not to be defined by our anxiety. Listen now to Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 6. If you decide to live for God, living a life of God's worship, it follows that you don't fuss about what's on the table at mealtime or whether the clothes in your closet are intact. There is far more to your life than the food you put in your stomach, more to your outward appearance than the clothes you hang on your body. Look at the birds, free and unfettered, not tied down to a job description, in the care of God. And you count far more to God than birds. Has anyone reflected in front of the mirror ever got his color by so much as an inch? All this time and money wasted on fashion, do you think it makes all that much difference? Instead of looking at fashion, look out into the future. Look at the life well. Think of a friend for stock. Have you seen color and design quite like it? The 10 best dressed men and women in the country are scattered alongside them. If God gives such attention to the appearance of wildflowers, most of it which are never seen, surely God will attend to you. Take pride in you. Do God's best for you. What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, to not be so preoccupied with getting, so you can respond to God's giving. People who don't know God in the way God works fuss over these things. But we both know God and how God works. Seek your life in God's reality, God initiative, and God provision. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Give your entire attention to what God is doing right now. Don't get worked up about what may or may not happen tomorrow. God will help you deal with whatever hard things come up when the time comes. This is God's word for us, God's people. Thanks be to God. Jesus said not to worry about what we'll eat or drink or what we'll wear, because God knows we need all these things. Seek first God's kingdom and God's righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. What are all these things Jesus is talking about? All the things we worry about, the things that create anxiety in us. Not only what we'll wear and what we'll eat or what we'll drink, there's a few more that have to have with. What will people think of us? What will think of our spouse? Where will be tomorrow or next year? What will do with what we have? And what will do about the things that we don't have? These are the kind of things we're anxious about. Jesus makes it clear. Don't worry about these things. Keep God first. Set your priorities in order and your life perspective will improve. But most of us know that anxiety is a habit that's hard to break. Most of these subjects don't much to be stressed about. Global warming, maybe even the weather, which used to be a safe topic of conversation. A minefield of anxiety. All of us here today have our own private reserve of anxiety. You likely brought to church this morning. Some are dark corner or trouble or sorrow or sadness or fear and you that you simply can't get away from. It's easy to be driven and defined by our words, by what makes us angry. Surveys indicate that 30% of the things we worry about can't continue, and 40% will never happen. 12% is needless worry over our health, and 10% is miscellaneous worry. Only 8% are real things to worry about. That adds up to 92% of wasted anxiety. Near the end of the month, Mark Twain said, I am an old man and have known a great many troubles, but most of them never happened. Jesus riffs on this when he said, who of you by worrying can add a
single inch or a single hour to your life? Jesus could also have pointed out that this excessive worrying has exactly the opposite effect. Not only will worry not add to our lifespan, it will likely shorten it through anxiety-induced disease and disorders. Jesus isn't indifferent to our anxiety and our needs. He doesn't dismiss them like they don't exist, or instruct us to brush them away like a pesky fly. Jesus says God knows what our needs are. God knows our stress about the state of the world, the state of our health, the state of our soul. God knows all these things. So it's not a matter of ignorance, but one of perspective. Jesus told us to focus on God and God's agenda, and that will help us gain perspective in our lives, and everything else will fall into place. One of the things that will fall into place is that we'll realize how much we've already been given, how blessed we are even at this very moment. As the psalmist sings in Psalm 103, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget none of God's benefits. For we suffer not only from anxiety, but also from amnesia, forgetting all of God's benefits. Peter, a leader in the early church, Jesus' closest friends, reminds us to give all our anxiety to God, because God cares for us. Trusting God to care for us, gaining perspective on how debilitating worry is in our life, requires reordering the way we think. Maybe a way to refocus our spiritual energy is to consider not what we need in our starting point, but what we receive. To try to replace some of the worry in our lives with gratitude instead. Like substituting an ingredient in a recipe. Remove worry, add a heaping helping of gratitude. That might sound simple, but so often the place we start is what we lack, and what we want, and what we're missing, rather than what we have and what we receive. So to shift that, the starting place isn't thinking about what we want God to do for us, or even what we want to be able to do for God or for others. It's with what God has done and is doing for us. It's a perspective.
And it starts with praying, with gratitude, with thanksgiving. The Apostle Paul says it this way, Philippians 4.
Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And God's peace, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Have you ever known a grateful person who was at the same time mean or bitter or greedy or selfish? No, that can't happen. Replacing worry with gratitude is a recipe that makes life more pleasant and less bitter. And that's better for everyone. For gratitude takes nothing for granted. A thankful life is a response to seeing life as a gift from God and realizing that our life belongs to God.
Think how different the world would be if high school students applying for college, or those in the workforce applying for a new job, or to be in a leadership role in the government, were asked, instead of about their grades or how much money they make, or about their past employment, if someone asked, is there any evidence that this person is grateful?
Gratitude was held in such high regard that we measured people by this characteristic instead of by their bank account or by their GPA. Chris Peterson, a professor of psychology at University of Michigan, says, people who are grateful are living better lives. So he asked his students to write what he called a gratitude letter to someone who'd been especially kind to them, but never properly thanked. And then he asked them to deliver these letters in person, if possible. We had no idea how wildly successful this would be, he said. College students always, almost always thank their mom and dad or some relative who's helped them. And the parents just go crazy, he said. They pulled us aside and said, that makes the tuition I have to pay worth it. Maybe it's not surprising the parents of Peterson's students were floored by receiving a letter like that. The heartfelt sentiments expressed in these letters acknowledge the sacrifices made for their education. And that was something that parents may have never expected to receive. They were happy, and the students were happy writing the letters also. They could tell how much those letters were appreciated, and they liked that. But the warm glow of exchanging a letter lasted long after their visit took place. Professor Peterson believed it had something to do with the actual writing of the letter and also the reinforcement of the relationship between the giver and the recipient. What gratitude does, it builds bonds between other people, he said. It makes those bonds stronger and more positive. Responding to life with gratitude instead of worry reinforces the relationship between the giver and the recipient, between us and God, between God the giver and us, the thanksgiver. And an award-winning author and Presbyterian, wrote a blog post yesterday about trusting God as the antidote to worry. He ended it with this story. Let me tell you from about 10 years ago when I was going to fly off to Africa. Of course, I've always been a little more tense than the average there. So I became fixated on all the ways I might die. Hijacking, being banned from Moses, snakes, terror, etc. But when all else failed, following instructions. So I went up to the altar call the Sunday before I left, and I asked the pastor for prayers. And when you get on a plane, it's a little late for baby prayers. It's time for trust and surrender. Trust and surrender. Left to my own devices, I said, I'm more about praying for God's will. But then adding in a number of my always excellent thoughts on how things should take down. I know God rolls their eyes gently and smile. So that's what we did. I prayed trust and surrender.
I pray not to be such a jerk. I pray gratitude. I pray thank you, sweet Sprinkle Spirit. And I pray make me ever caring and available to give to the needs of the poor. We already have so much energy, so much time. And with God's help, let's not waste it on worry. Instead, let's invest it in gratitude. Amen.